Good evening, New Hampshire. How are you tonight?
Good.
I'm so excited to be here. I had the great pleasure this year of working with Maryland citizens against state executions this year, taking Maryland, repealing the death penalty earlier, and Kirk and I were long partners, long days in the legislature. Before I talk about EJUSA, I just want to talk about one moment when our bill was on the House floor and we had packed the galleries and we had been, the Maryland Coalition had been working for easily 2 decades, and here we are culminating in the moment. The House is about to pass the bill. We're on the floor and we start to hear legislators talking. There's a time in Maryland where before you vote, legislators get to do what they call justify their vote, one way or the other. And we had legislators, conservatives, progressives talking about the death penalty, and they were excited. We started to have legislators tweeting from the floor, Facebooking from the floor, and for a few moments, MD Repeal, which was our hashtag, was trending on Twitter. And if you don't know what that means, it means that a lot of people were talking about us on the social medias and on the interwebs. We had people who were stuck on trains who were able to follow the Maryland debate and were able to see that there was so much excitement in the air. And we heard legislators, even legislators who voted against repeal of the death penalty, were talking about how they recognized that the system was broken. It was a failed policy. It wasn't working for family members, but they just weren't able to go the next step. But it was so incredible to see how the work that the coalition had done had broken through, even to people who we did not think that it would break through to. And so I'm really excited to be here and still with the Maryland campaign. Equal Justice USA is a small nonprofit, and we work to make a criminal justice system that works for everybody, all sides of the aisle. And I have the great pleasure of working with state campaigns around the country who are trying to pass bills. It's one of the most favorite jobs I've ever had is doing state policy work. And as those of you know who have spent time in Concord, spent time with your legislators, legislative work can be kind of wonky and kind of boring. But when you start to roll the ball, it's so incredible to see the way that people respond to just individuals sitting down talking. People like Kirk, people like Representative Cushing, who's out there somewhere, who are talking about their personal stories and are really trying to make a criminal justice system that works for everyone. At Equal Justice USA, we believe that the death penalty is just the tip of the iceberg, which is why we've been spending so much time working with state campaigns to help pass repeal bills all around the country. We hope to repeal the death penalty in the United States by 2025, and that happens with state campaigns everywhere. It happens with Maryland, it's going to happen with New Hampshire next year. So I look forward on June 8th, Barbara, to celebrating your birthday and repeal the death penalty. So I bring greetings from my colleagues at Equal Justice USA who are all around the country. And I'm sure someone's going to mention it, but today's World Day Against the Death Penalty. And so it's really nice to be sitting here and kicking off this campaign at a grassroots level, knowing that the world is turning away from the death penalty. The United States continues to stand alone, and so what you're doing here today is so important, and I really want to thank all of you for coming out. But we do live in a hopeful time in the death penalty movement. There is evidence that the U.S. is abandoning the death penalty is everywhere. Just 6 states in 6 years have repealed the death penalty. Public support is plummeting. There are poll after poll after poll. As you know, campaigns love to do polls, states love to do polls, and with each poll that we see support for the death penalty eroding. Even in California, who did not win on their proposition, we saw support for the death penalty plummet in California. It was such a close vote. 20 years ago, 2/3 of Californians supported the death penalty. In 2012, only 52% of Californians supported the death penalty. That is incredible. The work that we're doing is working. It's slow and it's incremental, but we're starting to see the states fall. We're also starting to see new voices come out and talk about the death penalty. Conservatives are talking about how the death penalty is a failed program. It's a waste of resources. It isn't doing anything to keep our communities safer. And we're starting to see other voices like law enforcement who are telling us that the death penalty isn't a tool in their toolbox that is helping them make their communities and their neighborhoods safer. That knowing that budgets are finite, there's only so much money that we have to spend, and if we're going to spend that money, maybe the death penalty isn't the place we want to spend it. Maybe there's a better way to spend that money. We might not agree on what those better ways are, but we're starting to see a lot of agreement that the death penalty just isn't working for us. As I'm sure you know, the death penalty in practice in the United States exists only in about 2% of the counties of the United States. 2% of the counties in the United States are the ones that are pushing forward this policy. And I think every day we start to see polls and we start to see movement happening, people are really starting to recognize that the death penalty doesn't work. And the death penalty repeal is bipartisan. As I've talked, we've been working with conservatives around the country. I have some colleagues who work almost exclusively with conservatives who have been to CPAC, they've been to Liberty PAC, and they have gotten such a huge response from conservatives who want to talk about why they think the death penalty is broken. And that's very exciting. Maryland was the only state to pass repeal in 2013, but there were a lot of states that were on the edge. Nebraska came just within a few votes of overturning the filibuster. Delaware came within one house of passing repeal. Montana is getting close. In 2014, New Hampshire isn't going to be the only hot state, so it's going to be a race to see who's going to be the next state to repeal the death penalty. Delaware is coming up. They're very excited. Nebraska is going to have another shot this year. It's going to be a really exciting year for death penalty repeal, and I look forward to having New Hampshire join that club, because it's an exciting club to be in. So, I can talk some facts all day long, but the fact of the matter is that state campaigns are the leading edge of death penalty repeal in this country. The work that you're doing is so incredible. And in recent years, state campaigns have really made it clear why the death penalty has to go. You're going to hear from Kirk tonight, and I'm not going to take his thunder. I'm just going to give you 5 reasons that we've learned from state campaigns why the death penalty has to go. 1, it's wasteful and it's expensive. 2, it's unacceptable that there is a chance that we might execute an innocent person. 3, it's a failed policy for victims' family members. 4, it's arbitrarily and unfairly administered. And 5, it doesn't make the public safer. All around the country, we are finding that people understand that this is the case and the death penalty has to go. And like I said, the reality is that the death penalty is declining, but it's people like you that are making that happen. This is not happening at the federal level. This is happening because of everyday work that you're doing, because you're calling your legislators, because you're talking to your neighbors, because you're talking to your family, and you're willing to engage in these conversations. And for that, I thank you. There are so many resources in this room. For those of you who want to go back and talk to people, there are fact sheets back on the table. I encourage you, take those fact sheets, pass them out, and have these conversations. They're not easy. We've all had awkward conversations about the death penalty with our friends and our families and policymakers and strangers, but it's worth it. And we have found that as you start to engage with people, and as you start to tell people stories like Kirk's story, after you hear Kirk talk tonight, the next time you talk to someone, it's a great story to mention, and I encourage you to tell Kirk's story to the wind. So, before I close down, I once again want to thank you for coming out tonight. It's a Thursday night. You probably have other things you might want to do. Maybe you've got television you want to watch. But being here today is the beginning of the next wave of this campaign. And New Hampshire's going to repeal the death penalty. And Equal Justice USA is so proud to stand with you. And I look forward to standing with all of you on June 8th as we celebrate our repeal. Thank you.